as a 22-year-old who graduated from college a year ago, I've had a lot of people ask me about what my perspective is on student loan forgiveness. And with student loan payments resuming very, very soon, I figured that it would be helpful to go through and break down the history of student loans in the United States. So in 1958, the National Defense Education Act was passed. And what's interesting about this is that it was actually started to improve our space program so that we could beat the Soviets. And so over the next 7 years, there was over $1 billion authorized in student aid. This also really expanded the role of the federal government into American college education. So you can read more about that at the History of the House of Representatives government website at the link that I have below. So let's break down though the whole timeline from then until now of what's happened with federal student loans. In 1967, the Bank of North Dakota made the first federally insured student loan. In 1973, the first major government loan program formed, which today we now know as Sallie Mae. Over that time period, student loans continued to grow and grow, but one actually interesting example of student loan forgiveness happened in 2019 under President Trump. Basically, he ordered student loan forgiveness for permanently disabled veterans. Now, we all know what happened in 2020. COVID-19 hit, the world went into lockdown, and federal student loan payments were put on pause. Now that happened in March, right around the same time that the 2-week lockdown happened, which quickly turned into 2 years. And throughout those 2 years, the payments stayed on pause. Up until today, 2023, when I'm filming this video. Now, I feel like people have been talking about the idea of student loan forgiveness for quite some time. And once payments were put on pause during COVID, it almost seems like it gave people another excuse to fight for student loan forgiveness because right now they weren't making their payments and they thought, what if I never have to make payments again? Now, when our current president, President Joe Biden, was running for president, one of the things that he ran on is that he'd be forgiving student loans up to $10,000 per person. And in 2022, President Biden announced that he'd be using executive action to do exactly what he promised. However, I think the real question to ask though is this something that he can actually promise? And to briefly answer that question, we quickly saw 6 states file a lawsuit together in Nebraska versus Biden. And once this made it to the Supreme Court, the result was a 6-3 ruling against President Biden in the executive action to forgive student loans up to $10,000. So here's my perspective on it. I graduated from college a year ago, and there was nothing that glamorous about where I went to college, but I worked hard and I got my degree from the University of Massachusetts. And when I was graduating high school 5 years ago, I knew that the financial side of things would probably be the most difficult part to figure out about my college experience. That's why I chose the University of Massachusetts. I knew that if I studied there that I'd be able to make it work financially between scholarships, student aid, and federal student loans. There was a point where I was working 3 different jobs and I was taking the train to school every day because I couldn't afford an expensive housing and meal plan. And during that time, I was thinking about all these classmates that I had in high school who were quickly taking out $100,000 easily in student loans over the 4 years that they were in college, without any plan to pay it off. And if you're from a family where your parents said, hey, go to any school you want and we'll pay for it, honestly, that's awesome, good for you. That's not my situation, and a lot of my friends, that wasn't their situation either. So to quickly put the amount of student loans in perspective, according to the Education Data Initiative, the average federal student loan debt is $37,338, and the private student loan debt averages $54,921 per borrower. Now, I want to keep some of my personal information private, but I do have under $10,000 in student loans. And if you'd like to help me pay off those loans a little bit faster, the best way to do that is by hitting the subscribe button below. It means the world to me, and I'm just so glad that you're here and you're watching this video. Okay, so student loan forgiveness. Is it the answer? Honestly, so much of this is frustrating. When I took out my student loans, I did it with a very clear plan of how I was going to pay it off when I got out of college. So let me use a quick analogy to put it in perspective. There are 2 18-year-olds who both want to finance a car. One of them gets a Toyota Camry for, let's say, $10,000, and the other gets a brand new Corvette for $100,000. Both of them signed a document saying that they would make their payments to repay the loan that they took out on the car. Now, a few years go by, and the kid that took out the loan on the Corvette is quickly realizing that he doesn't have the money to pay for it. So where does the responsibility to pay off his Corvette go? It goes to everyone else, the taxpayers, including the guy who chose to buy the Camry instead. All of a sudden, it becomes his responsibility too. Or at least that's what people who argue for student loan forgiveness, that's what they want you to believe. Federal student loan forgiveness, it's not one person being generous, seeing someone who's in debt and saying, you know what, I'm gonna help that person out, I'm gonna use my own money. That's awesome. Come together, create a group, do that, and you can be as generous as you want with your own money. But my issue is acting entitled to what doesn't even belong to you. And at the end of the day, it's neglecting your responsibility to pay back what you agreed to. Now, if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and you expect fellow taxpayers to be the ones to pay for it, you are taking advantage of their good financial decisions to make up for your bad financial decisions. No one forced you to take out these loans. And honestly, President Biden, it's not his ability to give away this money either. According to the Penn-Wharton budget model, President Biden would be giving away between $300 billion and $980 billion of taxpayers' money. It's not generous of him at all because it's not his money. Like, he's worth a good amount of money. Why doesn't he just give freely out of his own bank account if this is something that he believes in so much? And here's the danger that I see among a lot of people who are my age. It's thinking that the government exists as a charity to give us money for the things that we want but don't want to pay for. My fellow Gen Zers, if you're a millennial, it's time to take responsibility for our own actions. When you're an adult and you make an agreement to take out a loan, you're the one whose responsibility it is to pay for it. And at the end of the day, let me be very clear. College can be affordable. There's so many options: state colleges, community college, ROTC. These things are honestly such a great way to pay for college. If you're someone who's getting ready to go to college, honestly, that's so awesome. Know this, whatever amount that you agreed to paying off, that's in your name, and you do have a responsibility to pay that off someday. You've got this.